Hey, everybody. I am Ashley Barnhart.
Hi, and I am Dashley's dad, Joe.
And this is Growing Pains, a podcast about growth.
About growth. Yes.
About growth. So, this is our first official podcast, and we are going to be talking about something everybody struggles with, which is how to make the right decision in a difficult time. And this can really be applied to any aspect of your life, whether it is parenting, whether it is friendship, whether it is relationships, romantic friendship relationships, whether you should go to the gym or not.
Right.
Anytime that you,
And how do you
anytime
get to
that
the
you
gym?
hit,
How do you get to the gym too? I mean, you might want to go to the gym, and you're having difficulty getting to the gym, right?
Right. So we've been talking about kind of heavier topics, and I think a lot of us, again, in our kind of intro video, we said that this has kind of been spurred. This podcast has been spurred on by 2020, all of the polarity that has come to light in our society, in our culture, in America, and a lot of us are struggling with understanding what is the right thing to do in many situations. How do we decide whether we have a faith that drives what we do or we don't, or what that moral compass kind of looks like. And again, we might touch on some of those more sensitive subjects today, so just please be aware of that as we move through this. This is a growth process for us as well, so stick with us as we kind of discuss this and dig into this process. But to start off, parenting, I think, is such a great example of how do I know that I'm doing the right thing. And Dad, you can add a lot of experience to this as someone who's much further along in the parenting timeline than I am. And you move through this and you have different children. Some of us have one child, some of us have no children, multiple children. And you have to parent differently. You can't parent, each child needs something different because they're different people.
And not only that,
it's not
only that, you have even with the same child, you have different stages of development and different experiences through life that you need to be flexible with.
Right. And I've shared very publicly about my struggles with motherhood and even just moving into motherhood, and how it was a really dark time for me because my first child was not the typical situation of this kind of glowing experience, right? Of, oh, I have this baby and it's wonderful and we just are bonding and I love it and we're just so happy. It was dark and lonely and lots of crying and on both of our parts, and a lot of struggle. And lo and behold, I realized at about 4 months that I'm like, something isn't, and I don't like to use the word normal, but I'm going to use it here because that's what went through my mind at the time. This isn't normal. I don't think I'm experiencing a normal process of motherhood, because I see these other women that are in my life. I felt like I needed to go make mom friends. So I created a mom group. I'm like, I'm going to find moms to be friends with who are going through the same experience as I am. And they were like loving this, and they're just, and some of them had postpartum and things like that, but they still had this kind of euphoric experience. And I'm going, my baby doesn't smile. My baby doesn't sleep. My baby, and he wasn't colicky. We figured that out. It wasn't that. It was just, I just had a kid who was hard. And moving through this experience, and each month is going by and I'm expecting to be hitting these milestones, and I'm seeing my mom friends and their babies that are hitting these milestones, and my kids not hitting these milestones, and I'm getting these emails from these mom websites that are like, oh, and now this should be happening, and I'm like, this is not happening, this is not. And this is really right at the beginning of when autism started to kind of come on the scene as something that was, that you should be maybe looking at having a child who isn't typically developing. um and even our pediatrician, who is a great friend of ours, she was wonderful. She's like, well, let's just, pump the brakes. Don't worry, like, we have to get a little further into this. Don't worry yet. And my mother-in-law, even, she was like, oh, well, Matt, my husband, oh, he was a very stoic baby. And I thought, okay, well, maybe my child is just more like his father, like, and he's just going to be a late talker. And people were saying, oh, I mean, even you said, well, Einstein didn't speak till he was 4, and blah, blah, blah. I'm getting, people are trying to encourage me through this. And I was just in this really hard place. Anyway, long story less long, we come to find out that, yes, my oldest child, he is on the autism spectrum, and I had to fight to get this information, and just this whole process. So I've kind of spent my entire 12 years almost of motherhood fighting and trying to make the right decision for my child.
Right.
And then having, consecutive children who are completely different people, and how do I parent them, and having very basically very different experiences, but also going into motherhood with them, an uncharted territory for me, because I had never had a typically developing child and I had no idea what to expect. And boy, oh boy, was that just a different experience as well. I got to enjoy more of those, kind of joyful experiences that you hear from other people, and that the story of motherhood. But that said, a lot of what I have seen and experienced myself has been these big moments of, am I doing the right thing? Is taking screens away the right thing? Is, uh, you know, limiting how we do things in this arena? Is homeschooling the right thing? Is, saying, I have to get a diagnosis for my child. Is this the right thing? Is labeling him the right thing? And I I had this phrase that I would share with my clients, which was, the decision is in the deliberation. And I liked people to kind of sit with that and think about it. And what does that really mean? And we've all been in these circumstances where, and I'll use dieting because I think it's a little bit easier to wrap your head around. If you've ever been trying to either get in shape or lose weight, or you've had some sort of fitness health goal, and you've been faced with this, should I or shouldn't I consume this thing that's in front of me, right? And we call it food noise. It's kind of a new term for it these days, in the dieting culture world. And I would have my clients sit in this discomfort and ask themselves, do I have an answer for this? And the answer's always there. If you have to convince yourself,
Well, I disagree.
then you already know the answer. Oh, really?
Well, I
Okay.
disagree. Yeah,
I'm
I
curious to
disagree.
know. Yeah.
A lot of
Let's
people
hear it.
don't have the
Let's hear
answer.
it.
They don't have the answer.
Well, I think our instincts are trying to tell us.
And I think your attempt early on when you gave the illustration of Developing Moms Group is an illustration of you trying to figure out what the answer is. And I think that
Sure,
when you develop a group like that, you're trying to get wisdom on how to walk through the difficulties you're going through. And you may have an idea, right? And it may be the right idea, but it may not be the right idea. And see, that's the blessing and the curse of life, right? Because we want to go with a particular pathway, but it may not be the right pathway to walk down. And so to me, for instance, the world that we live in is an experience of two polar opposites. Yeah,
Hmm.
you have two
Yeah.
basically pathways to go down, right? And I go back to these aphorisms that we have in our culture that kind of describe this struggle, right? Um, for instance, which
Hmm.
is better? Um, the Rolling Stone gathers no moss, which means that
Hmm.
you are constantly moving toward a goal and you don't let anything get in your way that will encumber you.
Hmm.
Nothing will get in your way. You're going to get
Hmm.
to that goal
Hmm.
regardless, right?
No matter what. Right.
No matter what, right? In other words, moss doesn't grow on a rolling stone, right? And so
Sure.
if the stone doesn't move, the moss grows, right? So what is the other aphorism that is in contrast to that one? Direct contrast to that.
Uh, being
Stop and smell the
sedentary
roses.
and getting sure.
Stop and
Right.
smell the roses, right? So which is right?
Okay. It depends on the situation.
Both. Depends on the situation, right? Right,
Right.
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 And
Right.
so life is that way. Life is that way. And we find ourselves um, as humans, though, we find ourselves gravitating to the thing that really provides our emotional stability when stress occurs. So that's when stress occurs, that's when things get hard because we want to make
Hmm.
sure we're doing the right thing, right? So when stress
Hmm.
goes
Hmm.
up, the typical response that we have go to that comfort zone that we have in our life, that way of
Hmm.
doing things. So, for instance, if you're a person who is a Rolling Stone gathers no moss kind of person, then when stress occurs, guess what you're going to go to when uh, that kind of behavior? I'm going to employ that kind of behavior because that's going to settle my anxiety.
Sure. You're gonna run.
Whereas if you're the kind of
You're gonna or
person
take action.
you're going to run to that, yeah, and it may be the correct way of doing things. I'm not saying it isn't, but it may not be the correct way of doing things. And you have to
Well, do
be
you think that
open
goes?
to the.
Do you think that goes against the idea that the decision is within the deliberation? Like, I see. I feel like with that philosophy that I carry, I know the answer. I know what I should do. I just need to listen to it.
Well, what you should do may not be what you should do. That's the point. But if your anxiety is driving it, then probably you really need
Okay.
to question that.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Mm-hmm.
need to you need to learn how to let go. What we're talking about this podcast is
Well,
learning how
sure,
to
but
let go.
in a in a perfect world where your anxiety isn't driving you, right? Where you say, okay, I'm going to stop, I'm going to pause. That was something that I used with my clients as well. Like, just pause, decide, break down the situation. Am I, there's the acronym, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, HALT, that
Hmm.
they talk about. I think it's in AA as well. They
Yes.
use that. Are these other things going on, and is this driving the decision making? And if you can separate that and go, okay, I don't really love these shoes. Like, they're cute, but I'm not, so the decision is in the deliberation, because if you're having to deliberate, the answer. I don't know. Does
Maybe,
that make sense?
maybe. So what happens is that if your anxiety is connected to the desire to have these shoes, right? Somehow
Hmm.
it feeds into your need to feel good about yourself, and you can't say, "I can feel good about myself if I don't have these shoes." Then you're really maybe buying the shoes for other purposes rather than you know it, it's nothing wrong with buying shoes that make you feel good. But what I'm saying is if you have to have them, if you have to have that
Sure.
experience, right?
Sure.
I have to have my son obey me. Okay. I have to have that. And so you're not saying, okay, I can go in both directions. You have to first say,
Hmm.
I'm okay with going in both directions. And that's when your thinking becomes clear.
Yeah,
That's when you're creative. That's when ideas
definitely.
pop into your head that you would not otherwise experience, because if you're under stress, you're not going to be creative. You're not going to think
Hmm.
new ways of approaching a problem.
Right, because you're in crisis mode.
Yes, your autonomic nervous system is taken over. Your prefrontal cortex is not engaged. Your
Hmm.
so hypothalamus is or the I forget
Hmm.
which it is engaged. The back part of your brain, as they call the lizard brain, is
It's fight or
engaged.
flight.
Fight
Right.
or flight, right? Yes, that's taken over, and you're not thinking critically. You're not thinking clearly. There's no clarity.
And that happens in parenting so quickly. At least I find for myself that you're often in a rush. And I think, again, maybe if somebody's listening to this who doesn't have children, this can be it. You don't need to have children to have a lot going on. Like the dog, you're getting ready to leave for work, you're running behind, you have a text come through, the phone is ringing, your dog throws up, the cat runs out the door, you don't have gas in the car, you can't find your keys. There's all of this laundry list of things, right? And you get a text from somebody at work or whomever, a family member or a relationship that you're in, and all of a sudden, just everything like tunnel vision.
Right. Well, it's interesting nexus between the chaos in your life, and also whether you live by autonomic nervous system responses or not.
Hmm.
There's a connection.
Hmm.
The more you live by this sort of I'm living out of my fight flight response system, the more chaos that'll be in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the more need, so that chaos is created by the flight fight response system, and that flight fight response system says, I need to control my environment. I need to control it in order for me to be okay. I need to have those shoes. I need to have my son or not my daughter obey me,
Hmm.
or all hell's going to break loose.
I think the next place my brain goes, I shouldn't say I think, I know that as we talk about this, the next place that my brain goes is really how do my beliefs and values play a role in this? Because
Very much so.
that is
Very
the
much so.
that is the next yeah, that's the next step, or at least I believe that should be a part of, and I think it is for a lot of people, like you, whether you have very conservative values or very progressive values. I think as adults and parents, that drives a lot of how we are interacting with our kids and each other. And oh, well, should I say this, should I not say this, should I do this, should I not do that? And that bleeds into the question of what is truth.
Right. Well,
Right?
yes. Right. Well, there are to me, values are very important when it comes to understanding how flourishing takes place. Right. And so there are values that create destruction. People have values or
Mm-hmm.
rules, or let's call them
Mm-hmm.
algorithms, right? Since we live in
Sure.
the
Tech
age of
world.
AI, the age of AI, we
Right.
we
Right.
we have these algorithms that we live by. We have them in our head, right? And so an
Yeah.
algorithm might mean I'm stressed out, I need to get drunk. Or I'm
Sure.
stressed out, I need to break away from people and just become completely self-absorbed, right?
Yeah.
And so we
Well,
so
I don't know if people I don't know if there's a thought of like I need to become completely self-absorbed more as uh I need to escape.
I need to escape. I need to be, well, when I say that, I'm gonna pull myself away. I'm gonna become self-protective. I'm not gonna engage with people, no matter what people do. I'm just gonna resist any
Mhm.
engagement because I'm angry. I don't want to be bothered. Oh goodness,
Mhm.
how many times have I experienced that in my life, right?
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
and I'm going to distance myself from relationship.
Mhm.
A lot of marriage conflicts. That's a very strong dynamic, and a lot of times wives want husbands to engage, and husbands don't want to engage because
Mhm.
of the stress that they're experiencing, and they pull away, and that the husband pulls away, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yes, but that's a value. That's an algorithm that we have, and that algorithm is tied to, guess what? Our a need to establish emotional stability. My dad
Mhm.
had to have a dinner time, and both my brother and I had to be quiet so he could watch the news. He had to have that, and if we began to
That's
engage in
tough.
conversation, right, he would get upset.
Mhm.
There's there is that aspect to the struggle. So that's an algorithm, right? And so that's a value. So
Mhm.
you're going down in that direction, right? And so there are values that lead. There are obviously values that lead more to a destructive life, and there are values that lead to a flourishing life,
Mhm.
right?
So I think how would you define that? How would you define what a flourishing life is? And do you think that's different from person to person?
Well, a flourishing life is, that's a good question. No, I think there are general rules for a flourishing life, right? The general rules
Mhm.
that are there. I mean, I talk to my clients, and I would say a basic rule to follow is that is what you're doing illegal, immoral, or unethical? Illegal, immoral, or
Well, but
unethical, right?
then we look at I think and this is the crazy or wild world we live in. What is, immoral and what is illegal? Because what feels one way to one person doesn't feel another way to another person, which brings us back to that question of what is truth, right?
Right.
And can there be more than one? Can you have your truth and my truth?
Right. Okay. So yeah, I get that we live in this sort of secular society, and there's competing algorithms, right? And so
Mhm.
my algorithm comes from the values that come from the Bible, the scriptures, right? And so, for instance, and
Mhm.
I've told my clients this is might be not a bad thing to do when if you want your children to uh, you want to be an influence to your children, go to First Corinthians, which everybody knows. I think what First Corinthians is about. It's a love chapter where Paul talks about what
Right.
is love, define love. What is
Mhm.
love, right? And
Love
so,
is patient, love is kind. Love is slow to
okay,
anger, right?
okay, yes, right. Well, yes,
Every
and
it's like at every wedding ever, right?
love is not envious. It's not jealous. It does not. It love it
It's not
is always
boastful.
for the truth. It looks for the truth, right? So go down that list, right, and really understand what that's about, and then say to your teenager, "I want to be the best parent I can possibly be for you. I'm going to write you a contract that says if you see me doing any of these things as is defined in this particular chapter, you have the right to come and tell me about it, and I have the responsibility to change.
Well, what if your teenager comes to you and says, if you love me, you will, ready for the hot button topic item of the day, you'll let me transition.
Well,
And you will go and you will get me these, affirming things.
Right, and the principle there goes to a point where the young person at that particular time in life is not able to handle that question, as far as I'm concerned, because, and this is not just me saying it, it has to do with biology, because and most people it seems like what's taking place in our culture now, and I know we've just sort of jumped into the most difficult issue that's out there. There are a lot of issues that parents deal with. They're not that, but
sure,
that biology says the prefrontal cortex hasn't developed yet. In fact, the prefrontal cortex doesn't develop until what I think about 25 now. That it's discovered it. Yes.
Yeah.
And so so a parent is supposed to guide the children into flourishing. And if they make decisions, I mean, it's like, okay, they may want to drive a car at 11 years old, right? I have the ability, I have the size, I can do it. But we don't allow that to happen because of the potential destruction that could occur. And so you manage the relationship in such a way so that you're providing for them a sense of flourishing. And they may not like that, but that's an aspect of love. An aspect of love is also caring for your child and for the young person in a way that will create this sense of flourishing in their life.
Well, and we talk about boundaries, right? And setting up boundaries, and well, first of all, healthy boundaries. What healthy boundaries are, and I think anybody listening to this, no matter their perspectives on that last topic, can agree that healthy boundaries in relationship. Mm-hmm.
Let me interrupt you just for a minute, talking about boundaries, right? And so, if a child, this is from my own personal experience in working with families who are chaotic, and also families of transgendered young people.
Mm-hmm.
If that question arises, then you really have to examine yourself at that point and say, what am I doing? What am I as a parent doing in my life that is that may be creating the potential for this kind of chaos to occur?
Mm-hmm.
And so that sense of boundaries is also not just in terms of what the other person needs to experience, but it's something you also need to examine in your own life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, I've had transgender clients who came from very chaotic homes, extremely chaotic homes. And it seems to me that most, maybe if not all, people who struggle with that come from very chaotic homes. With chaos, there's a lack of clear boundary setting. And also, not only for others in your life, and it doesn't mean you become rigid. It means that you are able to allow the experience of your own sense of self-confrontation in your relationship to your child as well. Because you know that if you can experience that self-confrontation and you're okay with it, then you're going to develop a better relationship with your child and with your spouse. right? And so there it
The
goes back
sermon.
to, it sounds like we've gotten off the topic. It goes back to the sense of polarity, right? Finding that
Sure.
balance, right? So if you're unable
Right.
to say, I know I have to be a rolling stone that gathers no moss, you're going to be rigid
Mm-hmm.
and you're not going to be
Mm-hmm.
able to connect with people around you. I just had a person the other day tell me they don't like being with, this is an adult female, they don't like being with their father. They don't like it at all. And, and
Why is
I
that?
know a little bit of the history in the father's. Why is it? Because the father's so rigid. The father's so
Mm.
rigid in his communication. It's got to be a certain way. And there's no connection, there's no communication. And the daughter just doesn't want to be around him at all. And she's an
There's
adult
no
woman.
flexibility. There's no fun.
There's no flexibility, there's no vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have vulnerability, to develop vulnerability, you need to be self-confrontive. You need to be able
Well,
to.
we talk about transparency creating intimacy, right? And if you can't have that openness to have these conversations and to be close, right, it will not cultivate intimacy at all. We see that in every relationship.
Right. Yes. Lack of vulnerability destroys intimacy. And of course, lack of vulnerability, there's no honesty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure we've told people before the situation that I had to learn how to be this way because I was not a person who was going to be vulnerable. I grew up in a home that said no vulnerability. Always show people on the outside a picture of perfection. Don't ever show at all what's going on inside your home and inside your own
Mm-hmm.
mind, in terms of your own mind too. And so it was always a performance orientation. And I remember I was beginning to change, and the time that you and I had a fight, and you were like 16 or something, and I went into your bedroom and I said to you, I was going to confront you because you embarrassed me in front of your brother's friend, and we were getting ready to eat dinner, and I
Not
was
me.
you left the room, slammed the door, went in your bedroom, slammed the door, locked the door, and I was determined to go in there and all right, I'm going to deal with this, and I felt myself going in there with this rigid posture. You're the one that's wrong. I'm the one that's right. You need to correct it. So I go into your bedroom, you open the door, and I'm it just so happened I'd been in a conference, thankfully, for the whole weekend, and I that was in my mind. And the conference is about families and forgiveness. And so in my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, how do I do this? And the conference was still in my head, and I realized that. And when I said to you, so what's this all about? Which is a nice way of a kind of a counseling way of saying it's not my fault, it's your fault, right? And so, and I said that, and you said, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And you gave me this diatribe of how horrible a person I was and how you didn't want to be affectionate with me like your best friend with her father. And this is a long list of one thing after another, after another, after another. And I'm listening to you, and most parents at that point would say, what?
I'm done.
How dare you?
You can be
How dare
pissed
you
off.
talk to me like that? How dare you talk to me?
Oh,
Look
see,
at
I would
all
be
I've
like,
done for you. Look.
I think I would have. I think I would tell. I would be like, well, that's fine. You can feel that way, but I will emancipate you, and you can move out and find somewhere else to live.
Some defensive
I'm like,
response, oh, I'm going to show you.
Right.
You think you're so powerful. I'm going to come down on you, and so I had that I
Harder.
had that tendency inside of me, and so I decided. But I was had the conference in my head. Two in the conference was saying, "All right, you need to listen." And then I began to listen, and you were saying what you were saying was, I don't want to have a relationship with you, but you were talking to me, which means you're having a
Mm.
relationship with me. And it occurred to me, wow, that's cool. She says she don't want to have a relationship with me, but she's still talking to me.
Mhm.
That sounds
Mhm.
interesting, right? And then you get quiet, and I said, "Are you finished?" And she said, "You go no," and then you wind up again. Okay,
Ah!
you people people are like batteries. So I'm
Yeah.
let the energy out. Okay, I listen again, and
Mhm.
then the thought occurred to me. You know, I know you don't want to have a relationship with me, but I want to have a relationship with you, and it makes me sad that you don't want to have one with me. And you know what? I don't know what to do. I'm at a loss.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
expressed my powerlessness right in that moment. I was letting go of my agenda.
Yep.
And then what happened was really kind of cool. I had a flash of a memory right at that moment. I was calm. I wasn't angry. I had a flash of a memory of when I was 18 years old, and my dad and I were fighting, and my mom was trying to break us up, and we were almost coming to blows with each other. And I was yelling at him. He didn't care anything about me. And he was telling me what kind of horrible person I was, what kind of lazy person I was. I was using drugs.
Mm.
Frankly, I was pretty bad off. And that memory occurred, and I said, I told you the story. I said, I think I'm doing the same to
Mhm.
you that my dad did with me, and I'm so sorry.
Mm. Mhm.
And that changed the whole thing. Right there, we're having a relationship.
Mhm.
Right there, I'm leading you into vulnerability because I'm willing to walk down that pathway. There's a connection. And what's interesting is
Mhm.
that next day I come home from work, and then I don't expect anything. I'm coming home. I go into the kitchen where mom was talking to her, and you come out of your bedroom all the way to the living room into the kitchen, and you put your hand on my arm. This is the person who said, "I didn't want to touch you," on my arm, and you say, "That's a nice sweater you're wearing today, Dad." I mean, that was incredible right there.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
how relationships develop, and that's how influence begins to occur. It's when you're able to have that kind of interaction, and that's a real interaction. That's not perform so I won't be embarrassed.
Mhm.
That's not perform so you will be a better person.
Mhm.
That's when two people can actually meet, and that's when flourishing occurs.
I think there's a I think there is a desire in so many people's lives to not have these conversations. This avoidance of discomfort, major avoidance of discomfort, right? And addressing things. I mean, how many times do we talk to people and they're like, "Oh, I avoid conflict at all costs." Like that's just like not my thing. Um, but and it's so cliche, right? Like, oh, the best things in life, you know, aren't free, right? You have to work for them. You have to like really put effort in. The best marriages, require effort. The best, relationships with your children, you have to dig in and have authentic, caring, hard conversations with yourself, with each other, and it doesn't always resolve within one interaction. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes years, especially if there's a lot of dysfunction from many, years, and you're dealing with two adults now, a parent and a child who are adults, or um there's trauma or abuse or something else going on, or you, like, as a parent, um we bring in so much from our own childhood, right? That we're trying to change and do things better, and we talk about, I'm going to break the cycle, and how do I break the cycle? How do I become better at this so that my kids aren't burdened with the stuff that maybe my parents were burdened with, that I ended up with some of. But that doesn't come from scrolling on your phone, reading, looking at TikToks. That comes from counseling, self-examination, over and over and over and over, having people in your life who will tell you the truth, who will be honest with you, who will say, draw boundaries with you and say, you know what, I can't necessarily, with a friendship, I can't be around you if you're behaving this way. Because I can't, I love you, but I don't love this.
Yeah,
And
right,
I know this isn't you.
right. And you have to be able to deliver that in see in ways that it's not organized around your anxiety, because as soon as it's organized around your
Hmm.
anxiety, you're going to deliver it in a way that is probably going to come across as judgmental in some form or fashion.
Hmm.
And you have to be
Hmm.
open, to um, that process of letting go of your own
Hmm.
particular pathway to establishing your emotional stability. And so
Definitely.
yes, and you do that also by allowing yourself to experience grace in your life. So
But you have to understand what grace is.
you have to understand what grace is, and that is a topic that we can discuss at a different time. But that's
Yeah,
something that's very, very important.
absolutely. Grace for yourself, grace for other people.
Right.
Oh, that's a big
Yes.
one. That's
Yeah.
that's its own show. Yeah, for
Yes.
sure. Definitely.
Yeah, and that was an element, and that's part of the algorithm we're talking about. That is so essential. And then and like we come back to the scriptures, and it is there is an algorithm in scripture that is so important for people to understand, that creates human flourishing, and it's that central uh, piece of grace that really is the foundation for every other piece of algorithmic principles that you put into your life.
Hmm.
And so that's another discussion, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we hope that you took something from this as you embark on your week. Um, Ask yourself these questions, and look at your life, and how you're interacting with the people around you, and in these hard situations. Um, what's going on with me? How can I respond rather than react? How do I do this lovingly? And place, I think, well, first you have to ask, how important is this? And if it is important, which I think relationships are, I think our friendships and our marriages and our children and the people that we keep in kind of in our circle, right? I think they should be important enough to examine our behavior, and um, how we act, and what we want from the relationships.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So you know, it's we're on a journey.
Yep,
Yeah, we're on a
it's a
journey.
process.
Yes.
It's definitely it's a peaks and valleys and roadblocks, and oh, I wish it were a
Yeah.
straight line. but it's definitely not linear at
Definitely.
all.
No. Mm-mm.
As always, thank you for joining us and listening. If you have thoughts, please comment, share, like, follow. We will keep at this. And
Yes, if you have questions too.
yeah, definitely
If you have questions also,
post them below.
please.
Yes, please feel free to email us with questions or stories. We will gladly share any of them, answer them. We can use your stories as well to make podcasts, and we will leave you anonymous. Don't worry. But you can email us at Growing Pangs. That's GROWINGPANGS at proton, PROTON.me. Proton.me. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Dad. And if you are looking for a great marriage and family therapist, he is still taking clients. He does telemed. So you can reach out to him. And in Ohio.